Hey YouTube, Common Collector here, and today, as you guys can tell by the video and my outfit, we're talking about Nordics and how Konami could possibly fix them in the future. Now, if you guys enjoy this video, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video. Let's try to get this to 50 likes. I've been trying for a while to do a lore video on Nordics, which I know that you guys liked the Evil Eye lore. So if you guys want to see a Nordic lore video learning about literally every single card that is in the Nordic archetype, don't forget to smash that like button. Let's get up to 50 likes. Try to go even higher than that. And again, don't forget to subscribe. But before we get on with the rest of the discussion, I think I'm going to need a little bit of an outfit change. Okay, that's a lot better. I'm not used to having all that hair, or any hair for that matter. Okay, so first off for this discussion, I would like to talk about sort of where Nordics are currently sitting, and then eventually we'll get to where I want them to go. So the one thing that Konami did really well, like a year or two ago, was back in Soul Fusion, I believe it was, we got the new Ceravis card, which actually helps a lot with like the banishing mechanic and everything that we also got from the new Link monster, which was the Gulvig, which helps you to banish cards from your side of the field in order to special summon Nordics from the deck, which then allows you to go ahead and use those cards to then synchro into one of your Azir monsters. So that has been a really great boost for the deck, just those two cards together. So the one thing that I want to focus on is not going over too many cards, which is perfect for this discussion. I want to keep it sort of short and sweet and simple. But the big thing that Konami, we don't want them to do is to give us a whole bunch of new support that's okay, rather than give us a handful of cards that will really increase the power level of the deck. A great example of this would be back in Toon Chaos last year. We got a whole bunch of new support for Toons. I believe it was like 5 cards, which was right in that medium area of like, is it too much or is it just perfect? Which I think it was pretty well perfect. So to start off this list, I think we're going to have to go with basically what's going to be the Omni Negate, which we got Toon Terror back in Toon Chaos, which was the Omni Negate card for Toons. So going on here, we're going to be starting off with the Counter Trap card, Banished to Helheim. So don't pay too much attention to the cards or the names or anything like that. Basically, I just sort of chose whatever made the most sense. So Banished to Helheim just made sense to me. Helheim is basically their level of hell in Nordic mythology, so I just thought that it seemed appropriate. So treating this card as a Nordic card, whenever you have a Nordic or Azir monster on the field, I think that distinction would be pretty important. You could negate any of your opponent's spell, trap, or monster effects, and you can only activate maybe one of those each per turn. I think that this would really help with the deck just to stop those big blowout effects. Your Gulvig does add a really great level of protection to your Nordic monsters, and then thereby adds protection to itself because it cannot be attacked while pointing to another Nordic monster, which is an Azir monster. So there is that distinction that with some of these cards, you gotta kind of make the distinction between Nordics and Azirs, because when they're the Synchro monsters, they're the Azirs, they're the gods. So that is a very big distinction to make there. But I would like it that the Counter Trap card would work for if you have Nordics or Azirs. That way, if you're establishing your board versus if you already have an established board, you kind of have that control aspect there. Moving on though, I think one thing that Konami has not done very well for the Nordics is that they haven't really given them much of a good combo to start off with. We don't really have anything, even in control decks, there's a certain combo aspect that can come out of the deck. For example, in Evil Eyes, you have like the Surzeal, which can then pull out the Basilisk, and then the Basilisk can send stuff to the graveyard. There's certain graveyard effects that can combo off, add stuff to the field, add stuff to the hand. There's just a lot of synergy there that can go about, and really in Nordics, there's not much going on. Basically, the way that Nordics currently work is you summon out one Nordic monster, you link that away off into your Gulvig. Gulvig then takes away 3 of your other cards from your hand or field, and then turns them into Nordic monsters from your deck. And then after that, there's really not many follow-ups. I think that it would be really helpful if we had different ways to pull things out of the deck into the hand, get things onto the field. That way you're not just like establishing your board with just your Gullvig and one synchro monster. Hopefully you can get a little bit of protection and other cards to the hand and field. So the best way that we're going to be able to do that is with the new Nordic monster that I've come up with. Again, this is all just for example, but I came up with Scotty of the Nordic Champions. So this would be a non-tuner, which I believe that the deck is fine on tuners. We really don't need any more. We have like the Vanitas and whatnot that can sort of copy any of the other tuners. So I really don't think that we need another one unless they would give us one more that's just like even more aggressive and can spam stuff out of the deck or out of your hand, but I don't think that we necessarily need it. What we really just need would be a card that would be able to, when it's normal or special summoned, to search a Nordic spell or trap card out of the deck, and then after that we will get a little bit later to the spell or trap cards, or you could just make this a generic Nordic search, which again we'll get to the spell cards, which is why this is on the list. But in general, I think that this would be really great because then there would be the graveyard effect to where when this card is in the graveyard, you could then pitch another Nordic monster into the graveyard. This would really help set up your synchros for when they're sent to the graveyard. They can banish a Nordic tuner, which then allows them to get special summoned back to the field, and then they get an additional effect off of that. I think that that would be really helpful because there's, especially with the Gullvig effect, you end up banishing a whole bunch of stuff. So it would be really, really beneficial to be able to actually get stuff into the graveyard, get stuff set up. That way your synchro effects can always go off. But like I was saying, I would like to see a little bit more of a combo aspect out of the Nordics. So the only downside to that, like the other side of the coin, like I said, is that I wouldn't want like 10 new support cards. I would just want like 5 really good support cards. So for that reason, I just sort of combined these two effects. If there was something else that like would be able to do that, or even just any other effects, if you want to give us a tuner monster, which says like when this card is banished, then you can send another card to the graveyard or something. Just something that helps you to establish your graveyard and make sure that your Azir monsters always have something there when they get sent there. So as I was mentioning, there are a couple other spell cards that I would like to go over. So starting off here, let's go with Asgard, home of the Nordics. So this is just a stock photo from the Thor movies, but if you guys can't tell, I love Marvel movies, but I would think that we could really use a great field spell for the Nordics because, frankly, the Nordic Lights field spell really isn't doing anything for the archetype. That card kind of sucks. But I think with this card, just having a generic search field spell would be really, really important. Just would allow you to search for any Nordic monster when you activate it. So basically, you could summon your Scotty and then use Scotty to search for your field spell, activate the field spell, and then you can search any other monster. The big benefit to this would be that if you activate Gullvig's effect, when it banishes 3 cards on the field, all it needs is cards. It doesn't have to be necessarily monsters. So the big benefit to this would be that you could activate this, search something, and then if you really needed that one last resource, you could banish that card, and then you could get one of your Nordic monsters out of the deck off of Gullvig's effect and go in for a big synchro play. So while this card would remain face up on the field, it would have a really similar effect to Orchestrated Babel. I think that it's like if you're going to copy that effect for any deck other than Orchest, I think that Nordic is the one that needs to have it. Because the biggest problem with Nordics at the moment is that you can do whatever you want to on your turn. You can make Odin unaffected by spell cards on your turn. You can use Thor to negate the effects of your opponent's monsters, but that doesn't do you any good when it's your opponent's turn. So I would really, really like to see it that the Azir monsters could activate their effects as quick effects during the opponent's turn. It would not even make the deck broken. It would just make it so you can actually use the effects really, really well. And it's not like you're going to be erratating the cards or anything, because At this point, you either need this field spell, or you need to give all of the Nordics an errata, which, I mean, just, like, people don't like erratas. It kind of hurts the anime, which isn't that big of a deal. But overall, I just think that it would be really, really great to see all of these guys as quick effects, and a field spell is just the best way to do it. Then after that, like I mentioned, you could activate this card and then use it to get banished off of Gulvig's effect. So the third effect of this card would be that if the card is banished, you can just add it back to your hand. Again, we don't want to just make Nordics busted, we just want to give them good enough support so that they can play at like a semi-rogue-ish level, just so people can still have fun with it. Right now the deck is just nearly unplayable to where, I mean, if you went to a locals, you would get absolutely smashed. I think that if you gave us this card, which can generate advantage every single turn, it would be really great. Because the biggest downside to Nordics is that if you're trying to go into a Gulvig as well as a Synchro Summon in one turn, that takes 4 cards. You have to normal summon your monster, then turn that into your Gulvig. Gulvig gets rid of the other 3 cards in your hands, and then you have your Synchro monster. But if we were able to have some of these extra search effects, and then be able to use your field spell as a resource to banish, and then it would just bounce it back to hand, that would be really, really great. And then putting a hard once per turn on its search effect, or else giving it a hard once per turn on activation is sort of up for grabs. I would say probably actually the better way would be if you made it so it was a hard once per turn on the search effect, but you could activate it a second time. That way you can get the advantage off of the quick effect during your opponent's turn. So I think that that would be really great. And yeah, it basically would give you a free banish for your Gulvig, and it would be such a huge power boost to the deck. Next up is going to be the quick play spell, Nordic Call to Arms. So basically what this card would be used for is if your opponent is going to be targeting your Nordic monsters or anything, sort of doing any effect that would destroy them or something, then you would be able to use this to dodge those effects. Also, it would be a really great way to sort of OTK your opponent if you're just pushing for that last bit of damage. So what does this card do? Basically, you discard one of your Nordic monsters in your hand, which would then allow you to target your Azir Synchro monster on the field, and then you just swap that out for another Azir monster from your extra deck. So the clause on this would be that this would count as a proper Synchro summon, so that way if this new card does end up going to the graveyard, then you could still end up using the banish effect for the tuner and then bring it back to the field. So let's say if you have out your Thor and then you don't have any of the Nordic beasts in the graveyard, you could then swap it out and take out an Odin, and then as long as you have a Nordic Ascendant in the graveyard, then if, say, your opponent used Lightning Storm or something, that resolves, Odin hits the graveyard, then during the end phase you can still do the banish and bring it back onto the field. But again, for the OTKing, so this card would be just phenomenal because let's say you already have Thor on the field and you attack into your opponent, and then you have Odin as well in your extra deck. Then you just swap them out, get Odin out, attack for 4,000 damage directly, and then as long as you have another Nordic monster or a Gulvig or something, you're probably going to be able to push for damage because that's already 7,500 damage as is. Now again, you might be attacking into your opponent's other monsters or something, but when we get to the final card on the list, I think you guys might maybe see some potential to why this card could be really, really good. But overall, I think that it would just be really great for dodging certain effects and yeah, just OTKing your opponent. Like, this deck just doesn't have many options to winning and like actually finishing off the duel, so this would be a really great way to sort of boost up those odds. So for our final card, this is going to be a card that could definitely change a lot on how its effects and everything go. You could make it an Omni Negate card, you could do whatever, but there's already like enough sort of like negation stuff with the Azirs. But I did make a new Azir Synchro monster, and if you guys haven't already been able to figure it out yet, it's going to be Hela, Lady of the Azir. So basically, like, in Nordic mythology, Hela is a real, she's a real person in Norse mythology, so she is actually the daughter of Loki, not the daughter of Odin, which was in the Marvel movies. We don't need to talk about why they changed canon. It actually is canon in the comic books, but they changed it for the movie. I wasn't there when they were writing the script. But there is actually a very serious reason why I picked Hela for this spot, and we will get to that in a minute. It would basically just be a generic synchro for the Nordics, so it wouldn't require a specific tuner because, again, we already have the Vanadis, so it's not like we really need to we don't need to make a new archetype of the Nordics. So like if you really wanted to, you could make like a Nordic champion tuner, and then you could make her the one that the Nordic champions go into, or you could just make a new one like the Nordic descendant, because she's the ruler of hell. You could really do a whole lot of whatever you wanted with it, but in my opinion, she could probably just be generic. It's time to sort of let the, you don't need to like power creep the deck so hard to where like it's just unplayable. Again, we're trying to make Nordics better, so let's give them something a little bit more generic. And then again, like I was discussing with the previous card, there's just not a lot of great ways to close out games. So for the first effect of Hela, she would be able to destroy cards on the field up to the number of Nordic tuners with different names in the graveyard. That way, if you already set up like a Vanadis, and then let's say that you have a Guild Fax in the graveyard, then that means you would be able to pop 2 cards on the field, which would be enough that you could just sort of blast through your opponent's life points a little bit, try to do some damage, and then again, if you have the quick play spell, now you have an open field and you can do that direct damage and try to push for game. Now, next, the real reason why I picked Hela for this, and I might be digging a little bit too deep into the lore here, but I am a big fan of lore, and I do really love when Konami sticks with the lore. Also, if you guys noticed, I did give Hela 3 effects, so every of the other Aesir monsters only have 2 effects. So we're going to quick skip to the 3rd effect, which is when it's sent to the graveyard. So I figured for this one, again, we're not going to... I would like it if Konami would change it so that Hela would, or whatever extra synchros that they give us in the future, would not necessarily have to be destroyed by battle or card effect, that they could either just be sent to the graveyard by battle or by a card effect. That way they don't necessarily have to be destroyed. There's there's just a little bit too much like stuff that can just send stuff to graveyard that I would really appreciate it if they didn't necessarily have to be destroyed, because your opponent's just probably never going to go into that. And again, that could be another card, if we had a continuous trap card, or even in the field spell or something, that if a Nordic monster leaves the field or anything, send it to the graveyard and then it's considered as destroyed by a card effect. I don't know if that would ever be a thing, but it's definitely something that would maybe need to be a possibility, because just proctoring the graveyard effects of these guys is just not very easy. But again, you don't necessarily need them if you're increasing the power level of what they do while on the field. So again, the graveyard effect of this card, you can banish a Nordic tuner, just generic, and then you special summon Hela back onto the field, and then she adds back 2 Nordic monsters from your deck into your hand. So this would be a really big benefit just to keep that hand advantage. And then actually the reason why I gave Hela that effect, which goes deep into the lore of Norse mythology, is goes on to her 2nd effect. So with her 2nd effect, during your opponent's standby phase, you would be able to banish Hela as well as another Nordic tuner monster in your graveyard. Banish them in order to skip directly from your opponent's standby phase into the battle phase. The main reason why I added the banishing an extra Nordic tuner monster from the graveyard for this effect is basically because I wouldn't want this card to be too generic, because this could be a card that, if you made it generic, could be splashed into stuff like Dogmatica or anything that could just extra Foolish Burial from the extra deck, because then people would just try to skip the main phase right into the battle phase with any deck. So I think that this would need to be a card that would be archetype specific, but again, there is a really important reason why. So the reason for this would be that in the Nordic archetype, we have 2 other cards that are just absolutely not being used, and they're not very good at the moment, but if you gave this sort of power into the deck, then they would be really good. And those 2 cards are Fenrir as well as Jormungandr. So what these 2 cards do is that the Jormungandr can special summon itself to the opponent's side of the field, You special summon it in defense, and then when it gets switched to attack position, your opponent takes 3,000 damage. The downside to this is that your opponent's just never going to do that unless they can swing for game, because this card also has 3,000 attack. So if they're going to swing for game or something and it's not that important, they can obviously do this. Then with the Fenrir, well, you also special summon it to your opponent's side of the field. So then as a mandatory effect, Fenrir switches all monsters that your opponent controls into attack position, which is meant to make your opponent take 3,000 burn damage, which overall sounds kind of nice. However, now you just gave your opponent a 3,000 as well as a 4,000 attack beater. Now again, with Hela's Graveyard effect, I made sure to make it search 2 generic Nordic monsters. However, if you did so choose and your opponent was below 3,000 life points, what you would be able to do is Hela special summon back from the graveyard, pick up your 2 Nordic monsters, the Jormungandr and the Fenrir, special summon both of them to your opponent's side of the field, and then also, as long as you had your field spell on the field, during your opponent's standby phase, quick effect, you could destroy Hela with her first effect, and then in the graveyard, banish Hela as well as another tuner in order to inflict 3,000 burn damage to your opponent and potentially win the game. Now this wouldn't be absolutely necessary. The only reason why I wanted to do this was because in Norse mythology, Loki is the father of Fenrir, Jormungandr, as well as Hela. So all 3 are brothers and sister. So together they just make up a trio that is still not complete yet. And I think it would be really awesome if we could see her as a synchro monster, as well as a synchro that could actually enable the effect of her 2 brothers. The other big benefit to the skipping the battle phase effect would be that if you aren't setting up the Fenrir and Jormungandr thing, then you could just go ahead and still skip your opponent's main phase, which is generally going to be the time that they're going to be able to like bounce your Nordic or your Aesir monsters to hand and all this kind of stuff. So I think that it would just be really powerful to be able to stop all of that kind of stuff, make your opponent get forced into their battle phase. If they don't have anything, then that's too bad. Then they go to their main phase 2, then they can do all of their shenanigans, blow up your field, and then they still have to pass to you, and they didn't get a battle phase to do any damage to you, which generally isn't that important. So I still think that skipping that main phase 1 could be pretty crucial to the deck, and I think that it could be used in a myriad of ways. But guys, that's just my thoughts. Let me know down in the comments what you guys think. Those are my sort of my top 5 effects for what I think could really boost up the power level of Nordics, make them a little bit more of a formidable opponent. Let me know what you guys think, if you guys have any ideas. If you guys are playing Nordics, I know that my Nordic deck profile is my most viewed deck profile. So there should be at least like 9,000 of you guys who are watching this video, because I believe that the video for my Nordic deck profile from last spring is roughly at about 9,000 to 10,000 views. I really appreciate it. Guys, don't forget to hit that like button and let me know down in the comments again what you guys are thinking about the Nordic lore video. It might end up having to be like a 2-parter because I really love Nordics. I love the history of Norse mythology and all that stuff, so I'd be really excited to do that. Also, don't forget to let me know in the comments if there's other archetypes that you guys want me to tell you how Konami could fix, or other like custom card review videos just like this one. So please don't forget to subscribe, and we'll catch you guys for the next video. But before we get on with the discussion, I think I'm going to need an outfit change. But before we get on with the